Hey, hi, sorry. I'd like to open this video up with an apology. I have committed a big, dirty fuck up, and I've accidentally managed to record most of this footage in, like, stunning 480p, now with extra squinting to figure out if that's a car or an unusually shiny horse that I'm riding around in. I am, in fact, the silliest goose in the gaggle, and no one should listen to my ridiculous honks. Don't ask me how I fucking managed to record a PS4 game in standard definition, by the way. It is a mystery best left unexamined. Basically, I'm a fucking idiot. Most of this video is going to look bad. Some of it will suddenly leap forward to something approaching the modern age, but I kinda, sorta didn't realise I was one step above a fucking unregistered Hypercam 2 watermark in the corner until after, like, 40 hours of playtime. I'm sorry. Again. I mean, it's a port of a PS2 game, so this is how it originally looked anyway, right? It's fine, right? It's not fine. I know it isn't fine. With that in mind, let's just get this over with. Grand Theft Auto: San Andreas, the final stop in my merry adventure through the PS2 trilogy. So, if you subscribed for that, I'm kind of all out after this one. Whoops. Released in 2004, it received pretty much universal acclaim, which I choose to measure through the highly scientific method of saying it has a 95 on Metacritic, so I guess it must have done alright. Fans to this day love and adore it and want to give it a shy little kiss whenever they think of it. It would be no exaggeration to call San Andreas one of the most popular, well-received and enduring games of its generation. Probably of all time. I like Vice City a lot more. I think that for all of its ambition and scope, San Andreas doesn't measure up to its predecessor in a lot of ways. Yeah, it's going to be one of those reviews. Put your oven mitts and welder's masks on, everyone. My takes arrive and burn with molten fury, and no one will be spared from my stupid fucking opinions. Hopefully this video will provide some decent explanations for my nonsense. I'm going to try and justify my opinion here. I'm just probably going to fail at it. I'll be looking at every single thing I can think of relentlessly for God knows how long, so please prepare for that. Here we fucking go. Grand Theft Auto: San Andreas takes place in 1992, serving as a midpoint between Vice City's 80s setting and GTA 3's early 2000s. You play as Carl Johnson, henceforth referred to as CJ because I'm being very informal with him. After 5 years of living in Liberty City, CJ returns to his hometown of Los Santos, San Andreas, for his mother's funeral. From there, CJ is pulled back into the life of crime he left behind, rejoining his neighborhood gang, the Grove Street Families, seeking to bring them back to prominence among the Los Santos underworld. His journey will take him across the entire state of San Andreas, through 3 distinct cities: Los Santos, San Fierro, and Las Venturas. Standing in his way lie rival gangs, a string of betrayals from within his gang, and a pair of apparently all-powerful bent cops, Officers Tenpenny and Pulaski. CJ must grapple with all of these foes while I struggle once again to grapple with the fucking car physics. CJ ultimately will triumph. I'll just end up doing this. Let's start off with a rundown of the returning gameplay mechanics, and then we'll have a little poke around at Rockstar's innovative new burger-eating technology afterwards. You probably know the drill by now, unless you started this video. This is a poor video to start on, I'm afraid. You may want to go backwards, although that is kind of a time investment. So basically, you run around, you jump around, you shoot people, you drive cars, you crash cars, you steal a new car and immediately crash that one as well. There, that's Grand Theft Auto. Done. At least half of that list is considered to be crime, and crime makes the police, often renowned for their anti-crime stance, a little bit prickly, so they try and prevent you from criming any further. Ignoring them and persisting in criming will escalate how hard the police are pouting at you, increasing from Normo Coppo all the way up to the army trying to ram your tank off-road with their own tanks. Controlling CJ feels pretty much the same as it did in the previous two games, i.e. a bit wonky, but you learn to cope with it. Somewhat. The combat is maybe a little bit better overall thanks to some tweaks in the lock-on and how the weapons work, as well as the addition of a free aim mode that gives you a more traditional third-person shooter control scheme. You can use this for headshots or for damaging specific areas of cars, like shooting out their tires or hitting their fuel cap to blow them up instantly. I did not use this much due to being a lazy bastard who was content with letting the lock-on handle all of that pesky aiming for me. It worked out for the most part. Beyond that, San Andreas makes a few considerably more substantial mechanical changes compared to Vice City. For example, the big new move in that game allowed Tommy Vercetti to bend his knees, but it did not allow him to start crab walking away from peril afterwards. I'm pleased to announce that San Andreas lets CJ move while crouching now. Amazing. I can move behind small objects and actually use them as some flavour of cover now, instead of CJ just being locked in place, squatting down like he's got a blasphemous dump brewing that'll really show those ballers the true meaning of the phrase hot shit. You can even roll when you lock onto things now, which is useless, but it's there. And get this fucking shit right. The right analog stick. If you fiddle around with it, the camera will move in the corresponding direction, almost like some kind of manual camera control in a third-person game. Oh gosh. Oh wow. It's like I'm playing real video games now. Please, contain your urine. I know you want to piss all over my clean comments section in sheer excitement at that knowledge, but hold it in. Oh, also you can climb up walls and stuff now. This is nice for letting you traverse a certain terrain a little bit easier. Like, it is helpful to be able to just make CJ awkwardly flop over a wall, rather than having to walk around the wall. It's not an especially earth-shattering new mechanic, but it allows you to revel in the experience of fence-hopping tech, which is good. I'm kind of turning the bottle of sarcasm upside down and just squeezing half the contents all over these additions, and honestly, they don't deserve it that much. They're good improvements. I just find it rather funny that they genuinely needed a full trilogy of games to progress from you can't crouch, your legs have steel rods in them, to you can crouch, but it hurts Tommy's hips to walk like that, and then finally to, oh fine then, waddle as you will. Or that it needed a trilogy for manual camera control, which I'm still going to find a way to moan about later on, don't you worry. You can swim now, which is a pretty huge departure from the old games, where Claude and Tommy just gave up and floated face down in the water the second you touched liquid. You don't just die when you fall in the water anymore, instead you get to watch CJ slap his arms around and slowly drift back to shore, only to discover that shore is actually a sheer cliff face and there's another exciting 5 minutes of doggy paddling in your future until you can spot a little bit of beach. Sometimes, when I fall in the water in this game, I fondly miss Death's swift embrace closing in around me whenever Tommy Boy felt water hit his chin. At least I didn't have to swim around looking for a beach. Still, you can swim there. Regardless of the inconvenience when you do fall into the water, not dying is, I hear, preferable to dying, generally. It's slow and clunky, and CJ does not swim with the merman-esque elegance I might want from him, but it's there and it's doing its best. Right, next, they really bumped up the character customization compared to Vice City. You could give Tommy a variety of delightfully gruesome suits, but they almost came in a full set. Back then, Rockstar enforced a little bit of common decency on you and refused to let you mix the hideous tartan golf trousers with a Hawaiian shirt. 2 years later, they decided that their audience was a little older, a little wiser. We could be trusted now. In San Andreas, they let us mix and match all the clothing items as we like. Surely our fans will ensure that CJ is dressed to impress rather than to depress, Rockstar assume. I'm so sorry, my friends. You gave me a taste of freedom, and I became blood drunk. The first chance I got, I dressed CJ like a monstrous twat, and I have refused to budge on this stance ever since. Cowboy hat, ridiculous bandit mask to give him the allure of a modern-day Zorro, and then whatever hideous shirt and trouser combo my diseased mind could muster. You cannot stop me. I ruined every cutscene because CJ won't take off his fucking mask like he's a cartoon burglar walking around San Andreas searching for his sack with a $sign printed on it. The tragedy of it all is that they really fucking tried on this. There's all these different clothing stores, each with their own unique ranges. There are so many categories. Like, it's not just actual clothing. There's hats, there's watches, there's any accessory you want to staple onto the poor guy. You can get obsessive with how you want CJ to look. And I just give him red jeans and an awful polo shirt, and I strut on into town wondering why people are calling the fashion police. Aware, grimly aware, that underneath his stupid fucking hat, I have concealed a stupid fucking afro. You can't see it, but it's there. That hat is just barely containing its power, and it lies dormant, awaiting its return. Moving on, stat management is a pretty prominent new mechanic in San Andreas. You've got a whole bunch of different stats for just about every scenario or aspect of CJ. You're measuring fat, muscle, stamina, his lung capacity, how much a raw sexual magnetism his cowboy hat radiates, whether or not he is currently a respected member of the community, how good he is at crashing cars, and how good he is at shooting at cars and making them crash. They're a pretty significant addition, and they affect like almost every aspect of how you play the game, and I sort of kinda don't see the point in a whole bunch of these. I think the stats are a waste of time at best, and outright harmful to the game at worst. Bear with me on this section. I have so many opinions about the stats, and it's going to veer off in odd directions a couple of times. You've got all these different stats to improve and manage now, when once upon a time the only shit you cared about was your health, armor, ammo, and choosing Emotion 98.3 on the radio, like the tasteful individual you are. You most often upgrade a stat by just doing whatever it's attached to over and over again. So with lung capacity, you dip CJ's head underwater for a few minutes and you repeat this ad nauseum until he relents and plumps up his lungs a bit to make you happy. Your weapon and vehicle skills all go up as you drive or shoot or commit drive-by shootings. Your taste goes up when you mute the game and you put on an Emotion 98.3 playlist on YouTube. Stamina and muscles are slightly different in that they do seem to go up when you run around or are muscular at things in some unspecified way. But your best means of upgrading them involves going to one of the game's gyms and enjoying a thrilling session of mashing X or mashing X and circle until eventually you're told to fuck off and give your thumbs a rest. A few sessions of this in a row and CJ will be able to punch people slightly harder and run for a bit longer. The running one is good, at first glance. It is frequently necessary to move at a quickened pace to evade John Law or Gregory Gangster's violent intentions towards you. The punching, I feel, misses several key aspects of the Grand Theft Auto experience, namely that Grand Theft Auto is a game primarily concerned with guns and cars, and stealing cars. It's kind of in the name. I'd like to quickly throw in that each gym lets you learn a different fighting style with its own special moves and shit, and while it's important to note that the game revamped the melee combat to even have moves beyond a smashing circle to smash faces, and like they introduced blocking on top of all of that, and this game made a special effort to make its hand-to-hand combat a little bit more robust, which is interesting. Because the second you first get your hands on the gun, which is approximately half an hour into the game, melee combat is utterly invalidated, it never comes up again, and you would be a fucking fool to ever try it in any of the game's missions. Why would I punch people when they all have guns and they are shooting at CJ, and CJ's muscles do not actually make him immune to bullets? In fact, I would think being physically larger would cause him to be more susceptible to gunfire, because a stray shot can graze his rippling biceps with ease now. Why would I fucking bother, Rockstar? This is not, in fact, Yakuza. Melee is not the focus. There's an early couple of missions that tutorialize the melee that go to great lengths to show you San Andreas' new, improved melee systems, like it's such a big deal. And yet, melee is useless because this is a very gun-hungry game and you've no chance to ever use this. In fact, there's a mission in which you get challenged to fucking single combat at the end of a gunfight and you just kill the guy in one hit, like it's a joke. Like, none of what I just said matters for shit in the grand scheme of things, but that's kind of why I'm talking about it at all. The effort they put in for something that doesn't matter or come up ever, that they may as well have not bothered with. And I guess I just feel that way about the stats system in general, that it's a lot of effort for fuck all for seemingly no reason. The muscle stat requires you to grind away in the gym for a bit, for a stat that ties into this useless, completely vestigial melee system. The stamina stat gives you incremental upgrades to your sprint, a move that once upon a time had 2 durations, finite and infinite. And well, giving the game away early, you can get the infinite sprint in San Andreas as well, which means that stamina is ultimately a totally useless stat that becomes invalidated the second you do a totally separate side mission that you unlock within about 3 hours of story content. And meanwhile, I've just shat all over these 2 stats, right? Because they're trying to be this thing that affects the gameplay, but then both of them completely fumble this, either through being irrelevant or getting easily outclassed by optional content that you can very quickly gain access to. But there's still an attempt to make the stats, matter to the gameplay mechanics in a beneficial way, which is more than the fat meter gets to boast about. The fat meter measures how fat CJ is. When he is fat, CJ has less health, he runs slower, and his jump is reduced. This makes being fat somewhat detrimental to your gameplay experience. You become fat by eating. That's a basic health tip right here. Eating food is a mechanic that restores your health and hunger, and hunger exists in this game. Every now and then the game prods you to feed CJ some nutritious fast food, and this is the only thing you can feed him. I assume CJ sweats nothing but horrific processed grease at this point. It's kind of an annoying mechanic because all it does is pop in every now and then to interrupt your lengthy vehicle mission or whatever, and inform you that CJ is dying and must consume 6 burgers now. In a freeform open-world do-whatever-the-fuck crime game, it perhaps does not gel well with the established gameplay to include a mandatory feeding hour. This isn't really a survival game, you know? But it could be worse, I guess. Anyway, the thing about the fat meter is it's almost impossible to have CJ become fat without intentionally gunning for it. It takes a lot of food for you to start having this problem, way more than you will ever need to eat to fill your hunger meter. Simply running around in this game burns off the fat as well, so you can ignore the gyms and just play the game normally and eventually undo the dire threat of muffin tops on your own time. Meanwhile, if you go to the gym and build up muscle, the muscle stat actually completely overrides the fat, making CJ almost appear to be muscular. So if you naively boosted his muscles to gain stronger nose flicks, you no longer get to experience the gentle beauty of fat to CJ, because he will always be a beefcake rather than just a cake. The risks of fatness are incredibly hard to fall afoul of, which makes it seem really pointless. You see, this is why when Saints Row really got rolling, they just made being fat like a fucking slider on your customization screen that meant nothing other than you are fat now. It doesn't reduce anything, it doesn't get affected by a nebulous muscle stat, you just look fat. It works fine, it gives you choices. It lets you be fat and not take flack from the game for it. I recognise that I'm perhaps slightly hung up on the stats when they don't truly matter, but then why include them if they don't matter? Okay, no, I get it. Let's just skim over respect and sex appeal. Respect is pointless. It lets you recruit more Grove Street members to follow you around, going all the way up to 7 when you max out the stat. At no point is it feasible to transport 7 people around the map, so in practical terms you can only really take 3 people with you. This could have easily been relegated to just being a thing you unlock access to as the plot progresses, because completing the story missions raises your respect anyway. You can do nothing to go out of your way to raise your respect, and you'll still end up maxed out by the end, because the game just dumps so much of it on you. I mean, you might as well detach recruiting people from the stat completely if playing the plot is the main means of maxing it out, right? It's still a little bit silly, because for 2/3 of this game's story, you will not be in Los Santos, and as such you will be unable to access Grove Street members and recruit them. Respect, in other words, is a stat that is constantly being increased throughout the game, but it affects a system for one city that you'll spend much of the game very far away from. Yeah, useless. Just hand me the ability to take 3 guys with me and drop the whole system. Fucking Vice City literally had this as its 100% completion reward, so it's clearly not an alien concept to Rockstar. The respect meter is just, extra faff. Sex appeal is, controversially, just about relevant for a bit. Sorta. Kinda. Your sex appeal stat is determined by your appearance, clothes, and even what kind of car you most recently drove, because girls can just, like, smell the high-class petrol fumes wafting off of you. It primarily affects the girlfriend side quests, which we will come back to in more detail much later. Basically, you're supposed to manage your sex appeal, fat, and muscle stats to be vaguely impressive towards unfortunate women. They even remembered to introduce some complexity by not just having the solution be max out sex appeal, okay thanks, bye. You have to keep all the stats within certain parameters to convince someone to go out with you. Some characters prefer medium sex appeal, or low, or high muscle, or high body fat, so you have to actually think about your stat levels. Or, if you collect all 50 oysters in the game, one of the hidden collectible side quests, your sex appeal stat auto-maxes out so hard that it just disables their preferences, and you automatically qualify for being their fuck chum no matter what. As such, much like with stamina, there's a side quest that completely invalidates this entire stat and all of its associated mechanics. You have to unlock Las Venturas to finish the side quest, so you'll still be a decent amount of the way through the game before this happens, but nevertheless, oh look, they built a whole stat system and then they added a thing that circumvents the entire affair. Do you see why I find the introduction of all of these stats is so baffling? Like, they keep adding them in, and then either you can totally ignore them because some other easily acquirable thing has the same function as the stat, but does it better, or if the stat is meant to carry some kind of risk, it's almost impossible to fall afoul of that risk. And this brings us neatly onto the vehicle stats. Allow me to be blunt. These are a worthless, outright detrimental addition to the game. They are deeply foolish. They are buffoonery most high. They are tomfoolery beyond what I once thought toms could fool. They're a bit fucking silly. When you start the game, your vehicle skills are all at 0 for every type of vehicle. Driving around will slowly raise this stat, which then improves your handling with that vehicle type. On the surface, this seems reasonable. Then you play the game, and then you think about it beyond the surface level for a single second, and then you realise. This is fucking insane. This is ludicrous. This is a game in which your primary mode of transport, driving, is made deliberately worse at the start of the game, and the only way around it is to grind it up, driving in circles until the game is satisfied. Alternatively, you just suffer through the early game with way worse handling that makes everything more obnoxious and aggravating than it needs to be. When I first started the game up, I honestly thought I was going fucking mad. I was sitting there going, Is the handling worse than in Vice City? And thinking, well, no, why would it be worse? It's the same fucking gameplay engine. Why would they make it worse? And no, it is worse! When you start the game up, the cars control like shit compared to Vice City, which is impressive considering Vice City, and GTA 3 by extension, are notoriously disconnected from reality when it comes to how cars work. You have to gradually earn the right for the cars to control as well as they did in Vice City, and might I remark that this is, again, fucking insane. If you are actually going to do this, don't do this, but if you're going to do this, if you're genuinely going to hobble my driving ability at the start of the game, a small tip. Make my 0% handling be about as good as Vice City's handling, and then gradually make it surpass that. Don't smack me 10 rungs down the ladder and then assure me that in a couple of dozen hours I might get the thrill of returning to Vice City's barely functional heights again. Because I will simply point out that Vice City presented its best self to you from the moment it starts, regardless of how much of a shit show it actually is. It doesn't hide the real controls from you until you fucking danced to its satisfaction. It just says, here's how the cars control, and that's it. And this is a very simple idea that I would not feel the need to explain at length had San Andreas just made its handling as good as Vice City's from the start, and then made it improve from there, like a sensible sequel would do, but no. It starts out with utter mayhem, and then you gradually become worthy of only moderate mayhem by the end of the game. Fuck that and fuck off, especially since this very game already demonstrated how to do this properly with our last stat, the weapon skills. See, I actually like this stat. It makes sense. It has a function that does not get fucking humiliated by some collectathon side quest that gives the sieging laser eyes, and it does not intentionally fuck over your combat abilities in the early game. It's quite simple. When you first get a weapon, it'll handle pretty similarly to how it would in the previous games. As you use it more, however, CJ's skill with the weapon increases. This grants benefits like greater accuracy, increased rate of fire, the ability to move around while firing with certain heavy weapons, and in some cases the ability to dual-wield the weapon once you max the skill out. This is good, this works, this is fun. I like being given a better version of what I'm used to from a GTA weapon. I like being handed an assault rifle, or an SMG or whatever, and finding out that eventually I can move around while I fire these weapons, when in Vice City they would completely lock me in place. It's satisfying. It starts you out at a reasonable level of competence, and then it slowly doles out to the upgrades to make you a little bit more capable, to do a little better in fights. You don't get handed the pistol from Vice City, and then get informed that zero-skill CJ will occasionally shove a new clip in the wrong way round when he reloads, or he'll get nervous and drop the fucking gun until you've shot the regulation 700 randos. It's just the Vice City guns, but it eventually becomes better and also magically becomes 2 guns when you max the stat out. Oh wow, how sensible. How good. See, look, it works when you actually put some fucking thought into it beyond, well, we gotta justify that gym minigame somehow. Every other stat type in this game was either a bad idea or it becomes a bad idea because some other thing in the game actively works against it. Weapon skills work perfectly. It doesn't make you shittier than previous games to artificially reward you with the magic of being as good as you used to be, and it doesn't end up getting replaced by anything. It just makes your guns a little better as time goes on, and it does that well. Lovely, isn't it? It's why I picked it to end the stat segment on, so I can pretend I'm being reasonable by finishing on a positive. Sorry, I lied. Can I make a quick couple of jokes about the car modding? You can do that now. You can tweak your car in all manner of delightful ways, which is just swell for anyone who cares. I'm just going to make my car horrible and hideous, as it ought to be. I did this purely for the video, by the way. I would never do it for my own pleasure in the game, because nah, fuck that, why would I ever? In GTA? In a world with these physics? My precious baby is going to get fucking tipped out of its pram down a 20-story flight of stairs the second I pull out of the garage, man. My car will fucking blow up immediately. And then what? All those minutes wasted because my car is fucking toast. You mod a car in San Andreas and you drive your new little treasure to one of your garages and yeah, keep it there where it will be safe. The risk is too great. What if it flips? What if you're rammed off the road? Then it's gone. I hate to bring up Saints Row again, but you know, that game just saves your cars so you could summon them from the vroom vroom void when needed. It took the risk away so you'd actually be willing to use your special boy Sillymobile. In San Andreas, well, nah, that shit's one of a kind and this game is going to kill it, so I never used this mechanic. Thanks, there, I'm done with this bit. I would now like to have a nice long chat about the main storyline missions of this game, because they're kind of where the majority of my issues with this game come from. I find this to be a bit of a shame because I genuinely had a lot of fun with Vice City's storyline, whereas San Andreas' story had worn pretty thin on me by the end. I'm afraid this is going to be another pretty fucking meaty section, by the way. When I say in-depth, I do indeed mean in-depth, although it's mostly the depths of my fucked psyche that we're delving into. Right, the story missions. To explain why I've got such a problem with them, let me boil down why I like the story missions in Vice City so much into some nice, tidy sound bites for you. Vice City's story missions are, by and large, pretty good because they are short, lasting like 5, maybe 10 minutes at most each. They are fairly mechanically varied and full of fun gimmick ideas, and the game's main story is actually pretty brief overall, lending it a nice sense of brevity. It doesn't drag itself out for a million years. It stops, well, probably when it ran out of ideas, which is kind of ideal, isn't it? You're looking at somewhere between 30 to 40 missions in total to reach the end of the game, since you're required to do a few of the asset missions to unlock the final 2 missions. Keep that guesstimate in mind for later, it'll be fun. If you want the extremely short version of this upcoming lecture, my issue with San Andreas is that its storyline is pretty much the opposite of all 3 of those points. The missions can drag on, they are repetitive, and there is so goddamn much of it. I will now go into yet more excruciating detail on all 3 of these points, and more, so I hope you've emotionally prepared yourself for that. Let's just go ahead and start with the mission ramps, eh? They're too fucking long. There you go. Okay, to elaborate, first of all, not all of the missions are too long. There are missions within this game that adhere to GTA 3 and Vice City's tried and true bite-sized adventure philosophy. I will not pretend otherwise. However, there's more than a few instances where I felt like they were just far too lengthy and grandiose for their own fucking good. Like, I just don't think the game is suited for long-form missions at all. Okay. Let me back up and properly explain why I even think the short mission structure works well in the first place, because I don't think I've ever done that. It kind of comes down to two things: your character's frailty and the complete lack of a checkpoint system. A constant across all three PS2 GTA games is that your character has never really been all that inspiring in the health department. You get shredded by anyone packing heat to steamier than a water pistol in these games, even with full armor and health upgrades. This means if you're even a little bit sloppy, you will get fucking clowned upon. Now, combine that with the zero checkpoint design of the missions, and you've actually got a pretty harsh punishment for failure. You will always be sent to the very start of the mission, and up until this game, you'd always have all of your weapons taken away to boot, forcing you to gear back up to try again. Now, if you're fragile as shit and prone to death, and death means a total reset on your mission progress, what's the better idea? Small missions that don't take long to complete so that your all-too-common failure is a little easier to cope with, or big fucking monster missions with 5 phases and a half-hour time investment? I would hope that the answer is fairly obvious here. You keep it short, because long missions with 0 checkpoints, in a game where you can't take damage for shit, is an incredible recipe for frustration. This is why almost every GTA 3 and Vice City mission is so tiny. This is a philosophy that San Andreas still keeps in mind, but my issue is with the missions that are long as shit, and more often than not, those long missions are also incredibly combat-focused, which, if you'll recall my sage counsel not 20 seconds ago, is a very, very bad idea if you're a no-health, no-hoper. Like, okay, here's an example. A Los Santos mission called Reuniting the Families. So you start the mission and you drive on over to a motel to help Carl's brother, one Sweet Johnson, attend a meeting between the various family gangs. It all goes a bit Pete Tong, as these things are wont to do, so CJ leaps in to rescue Sweet. You fight your way through several floors of the motel, beset by SWATos trying to SWAT you at every turn. You eventually emerge onto the rooftop, where Sweet instructs you to shoot down a police helicopter. You do so when suddenly your compatriots Big Smoke and Ryder wheel in to help you escape Jonathan Law's fury. Normally, I would expect this to be the final, fairly brief phase of the mission. A quick chase to the local pay-and-spray to sand off my wanted level, and then we'd all fuck off home to talk about boys for the rest of the night. San Andreas is a little bit wily and instead has CJ clamber into the passenger seat while Large Smog treats him to a leisurely tour of the entirety of Los Santos, the cops in piping hot pursuit and shooting the shit out of you all the while. You must then, for several minutes, enjoy an on-rails shooting segment wherein humongous fog refuses to get a fucking shift on, your car isn't particularly durable, and your aim is PS2 GTA aim, i.e., absolute fucking shit. This is quite a long mission, don't you know, and it is fraught with peril at every single turn. You have to go through quite a bit of combat to reach the end of the hotel segment, and then the helicopter segment, and then this long-ass scripted chase sequence where you gotta be on the fucking ball and wrangle those controls into submission to just barely squeak through. And of course, death lurks at every step of this affair, eager to kick you back to square one. This is the second last mission of the Los Santos portion of the game, so we'll call it a relatively pivotal moment, you know, a climactic mission to raise the stakes. Let us now compare it to a similarly situated mission from Vice City, say, one of the first missions you get that allows you to access the game's second island. In The Fastest Boat, you are tasked with stealing the fastest boat. To do this, you drive to a very small boatyard, shoot about 10 guys, and then you steal the boat and drive it back home. That's it. That's the mission, and it's pretty much as long as it needs to be. It does not make you fight through a 5 times larger variant of that boatyard and then shoot down helicopters, and then enjoy a 5-minute on-rails chase sequence where Lance Vance makes sure to circuit the entire fucking city first, before finally slamming the boat through a window at Diaz's mansion. You just shoot some guys and steal a boat, and for GTA, that is all you need. San Andreas intermittently forgets that the short mission design works really well, and it usually forgets this right when it thinks, God, combat. Combat is fun as shit in these games, right? How's about a great dirty dollop of it right on your plate? And, I mean, yeah, the combat can certainly be fun, but it kind of works best in small doses, because GTA combat is clunky and dangerous and also really rather shallow. There's a reason Vice City had, like, maybe 2 or 3 somewhat lengthier firefights in its entire runtime, and even those paled in comparison to San Andreas' fucking shootouts. In fact, let us do a compare and contrast of the 2 final missions of these games. Keep your friends close in Vice City, and End of the Line in San Andreas. Oh no, spoilers! Spoilers for a GTA game from 2004. Oh no, sirens, please begin blaring. Here's your timestamp, if you don't want to know that Tommy Vercetti shoots a lot of people at the end of Vice City. Okay, let's do a rundown of Keep Your Friends Close. Some mafia goons are running towards your safe, and you shoot them for a minute or 2. Lance Vance calls you a big smelly poo, and you pursue him to call him a bigger, smellier poo. To do this, you walk up a couple of flights of stairs and then shoot a couple of guys. When you dispose of Lance, you walk back downstairs and shoot Sonny Forelli in the face. There are some guys between you and him, but not terribly many. When you shoot Sonny Forelli in the face, the mission is over and the game is completed. If you die at any point during this, you're really only having to retry about 3 objectives. Shoot Mafia, shoot Lance, shoot Sonny. The final mission of the game is a straightforward combat sequence, but it's actually remarkably short and simple. And even if you fail, all of the weapons that you need to retry are like right outside where you start the mission. Now let us turn our gaze to End of the Line in San Andreas. First you have to steal a tank and drive it through the front of Big Smoke's Crack Palace, a magnificent name that is almost beautiful in its shittiness. Once you have entered the hallowed halls of the Crack Palace, you must fight your way from the ground floor to the 4th floor, with dozens of guards standing between you and Big Smoke. There are a lot of fucking guards. I would say that 1 floor of the Crack Palace probably sends about as many guards at you as you would kill in Phase 1 of Keep Your Friends Close. At the top of the palace, you find Humongous Mist angrily playing Grand Theft Auto San Andreas and lamenting the inclusion of the driving skill stat. Fed up with Rockstar's bullshit, he battles you to the death in a fight that's slightly longer than the Lance or Sonny fights, and even goes so far as to have multiple phases, like him bringing in reinforcements or turning off the lights. With Jumbo Suit dead, you must now escape the Crack Palace, which is burning to the ground, yet is still crawling with guards prioritizing your failure over their own escape from the fucking fiery death house. You must fight your way through the entire palace again, but under a time limit. This section is theoretically made even longer than it was for me, by the presence of fires blocking your path that you're meant to extinguish. Luckily for me, I was fucking fireproof, so I just had CJ strong through every single raging inferno, wondering why his gun appeared to be melting in his hands. Having made my daring escape where I skipped half the mechanics of the segment, you must now pursue the final shitbag, Officer Tenpenny, as he flees in a fire truck, maintaining a safe distance from him so that you don't ram him and harm Sweet, who's clinging onto the ladder. Eventually you catch Sweet, allow him to swap into the driver's seat as he chases Tenpenny, and then you enjoy a final on-rails shooting segment where you defend the car. Finally, Tenpenny crashes his truck, game ends, everyone takes a huge shit on his grave. Wonderful. That's fucking long! That's really, really fucking long, and there's a lot of fucking combat in that. The final boss fight is actually only the midpoint of that mission. There's a full retread of the combat shack that you already climbed up, and then a long chase sequence that you can easily fail in quite a few ways. Again, that's really fucking long, and you are so very, very tender and vulnerable, and checkpoints are considered a luxury beyond your means. You might say that it's the final mission, so it should be lengthy and climactic to suit the grandeur of a finale. I might say, fuck off, give me some checkpoints then. I'd also say that Vice City's finale felt plenty climactic without needing this much going on. Like, when it comes down to it, you really do just run up and down some very small flights of stairs and shoot 2 guys. But that was fine. San Andreas just overindulges so hard, but it doesn't really have combat with the depth or mechanical quality to back it up, and its health and checkpoint mechanics run totally counter to a lengthy mission structure. Okay, that's enough of that, I think. Welcome back, everyone who skipped the spoilers. The bottom line is, the lengthy missions aren't conducive to the mechanics of a GTA game. The shorter missions are. Vice City had a lot of shorter missions compared to San Andreas, so I think it wins on that count. Next up, let's take a look at the issue of mechanical variety. Technically, I've covered this already by bringing up how most of San Andreas' long missions are heavily combat-oriented. To simplify it slightly, San Andreas has two favourite mission types that it inevitably falls back on every 2 or 3 missions. A big old firefight, or a chase where you blow up someone's car. Gimmicks and more innovative mission types take a severe backseat to these two archetypes, and I think it really harmed my enjoyment of the storyline. See, part of what makes Vice City's missions work as well as they do are that combat sequences and blowing up someone's car are in there, but there's a bit more effort to include weird, wacky shit. Even if it's just a different flavour to the combat or the chases, they still did something to change it up. You'd disguise yourself as a striking worker and cause a riot at a building company. You'd use a remote-control helicopter to plant explosives, a tiny plane to drop bombs on drug smugglers. You'd find a way to steal a heavily guarded tank. You'd fly a plane over town dropping porno leaflets. You'd shatter windows in the mall to intimidate the store owners into paying protection money. There's a real effort to be different in each mission, even if that mission doesn't end up that great. San Andreas can still come up with fun, interesting ideas like these when it wants to. Off the top of my head, there's the mission where you burn down a dude's massive weed plantation before shooting down a bunch of helicopters and escaping in his incredibly shitty hippie-mobile. Or the one where you strap a guy to the hood of your car and you have to drive around at top speed to scare him and force a confession out of him. That's a fun, if not rather grim idea. The one where you have to overtake an apparently notoriously crazy driver and then deploy stingers to pop her tires and force her out of her car, and then you steal it for your own personal amusement, that's fun. Although I think it's a bit of a missed gimmick opportunity that you don't have to try and drive it home with 4 fucked up tires. In one mission, you disguise yourself as a valet so that you can steal a guy's car without him being suspicious of you. And then you drive it across town to plant drugs in it, return it to him, and frame him for possession. That's a fucking different concept at the very least, you know? It takes some creativity. They even try and introduce some brand new mechanics that Vice City never had to freshen things up. There are stealth missions scattered throughout the story, and there's a couple of sequences where you play a rhythm game early on, for example. Initially, it feels like Rockstar is giving the variety quite a good go. I have said all of this as a ploy to sufficiently cover my arse, so I can roar in and say that there's too many fucking missions where you just shoot through 10 million guys and hope the auto-aim is on form today. Or you chase after someone and you drive by them awkwardly into submission. In moderation, a few missions like this are not a bad thing. The combat is not especially inspired in these games, but in short bursts, there's a little bit of fun in them. But there's just too many of them. There's too many instances of a big, long combat tunnel sprawling out before you, full of goons with the biggest guns possible. Like, here we are in Las Venturas, and here's a mission to escort Vice City alumni Ken Rosenberg from a warehouse full of goons. Here's a Las Venturas mission, where you walk into a warehouse and you shoot a room full of goons. Here's a Las Venturas mission, where you walk into a military base and shoot soldiers, but don't fret, the soldiers behave like goons, and the interior of the base just looks like a fucking warehouse to help you feel nice and at home. I think 3 missions where you do the same shit in the same kind of building, all within the same city, is potentially a little bit excessive. This isn't even getting into me being an asshole about it and including every Las Venturas mission that can be surmised as shoot goons. Like, here's an exciting one where you go to Liberty City for the day. Oh boy! All you do is shoot 1 million goons in a cafe and leave. Thanks, you couldn't have made me shit my pants in excitement and let me actually go to Liberty City for a mission and include it as a map? You didn't even need to give me the whole of Liberty City, you know, just Portland. That would have been a fun memory lane Easter egg. But, no. The interior of one cafe is fine too. And all I do is shoot some guys like I've done in this game so many, many times before, and each time it is the exact same scenario. I whip out the auto-aim, and I just let it work its magic. Because, again, GTA combat is fun in little bursts, but its flimsiness becomes incredibly obvious when you spend a lot of time with it, like you do in this game. The game just has a problem with repetition in general, honestly. The Great Warehouse Shootout trilogy serves as a prime example, but I would like to highlight a few more. First, there is the thrilling saga of Jizzy. Jizzy the Pimp, as he is known. Rockstar, you don't actually need to double down on the come get love-fisted thing, you know? You know there's sex jokes beyond just saying the sex word, right? I mean, I could call a character Sir Cum-a-Lot, and it wouldn't exactly be a rib tickler, would it? Even you must see that there's a casino called Cum-a-Lot, isn't there? Fucking Rockstar. Anyway, your first mission for Spunko culminates in a surprisingly frustrating car chase with a manic street preacher whirling around like a fucking loon, wherein you must blow his limo up. A few minutes later, CJ channels good old Claude's cosmic fuckwittery and decides to murder Spermy. This is initially framed as a stealth mission where you break into his boob fortress through the roof and then you sneak down to the bottom floor. Everything about this suggests that you're planning to assassinate him sneakily. CJ reaches the bottom floor, he begins honking loudly and angrily at Cummies, which causes a seaman man to flee in his car. You must then chase him down in your own car and blow his pimpmobile up. I'd like to point out that the first and last missions associated with Sir Jizz of E are mechanically the fucking same, and they go so far as to make him escape in the very same car that you had to use in his first mission. This could be somewhat clever mirroring, his downfall brought about by the very tools you once helped him with or some shit. It mostly just makes me think, oh wow, I thought I was going to not chase him in my fucking car and drive by him awkwardly. I thought I was getting a stealth mission. Shows what I know, eh? As I pack away my mixtape of Metal Gear Solid ambient music. No stealth tonight, lads. Rockstar decided that another chase was easier. It's not even that I think the stealth missions are all that amazing, because they kind of ain't. GTA and stealth don't mix particularly well, and it's difficult to judge whether sneaking up behind a guy to stab him with your designated stealth knife is going to trigger the instant kill silent poker technique, or if CJ is just going to take a swing at him and alert the whole building instead. The systems are just not very precise or well put together at all, and they kind of reveal why games like Metal Gear Solid often use shit like vision cones to clue you in on whether CJ's fucking hat is poking out from behind a crate or not. But peppering a few in here and there is at least varied, it's an effort. Passing up the chance to include one for the sake of having another fucking car chase after fooling me into thinking I was going to be stealthy today is very silly. Bait and switching me into a mission type that's already wearing thin just seems a little bit foolish from my angle. I would like to provide a second, very small example of this from the countryside arc of the game's story. You do a race. Boo, I hate races. But I pull through, tears are streaming down my face all the while. Then there's just another fucking race right afterwards in the same general area, but slightly longer this time. And Claude from GTA 3 is there, and you have to beat him, which feels almost rude in a way. You'd think they'd leave him totally untouchable due to being the iconic GTA 3 protagonist, but no, CJ pushes his shit in. It's weird. The humiliation must have made his facial features melt off in shame by the time of 3 as well. He looks way too defined for my liking in this game. 2 races in a row within the same area is still very silly. My last example comes from the end of the game, and I think it demonstrates how utterly, thoroughly exhausted Rockstar were creatively by the time they were hitting the endgame missions. You return to Los Santos for the final arc of the story, your brother Sweet in tow. Sweet has a few missions for you before you can reach the finale. In 2 or 3 of these missions, you drive him to a spot on the map and you just do the game's gang war minigame. This does not need much explaining, so I'll just do it right here. You start a gang war by moving into an area of Los Santos that's coloured purple or yellow on your map, and you shoot 3 members of the rival gang. This then triggers a brief fight where you have to survive against 3 waves of gangsters attacking you. They are generally armed with assault rifles, which is honestly a bit fucking nutso considering how hard those things murder you, but they're also kind of stupid and inept, and you get health and armour pickups between every wave, so it's not that hard. When you win, you now own that territory and Grove Street members will spawn there. I think it perhaps says a lot that Rockstar resorted to, we haven't got any ideas, just do this. and slapped the gang war minigame into like 2 or 3 endgame missions with pretty much zero twist or gimmick to them. You just do gang war. That's it. That's the mission complete. It says even more that the gang wars are very straightforward combat exercises where you just stand in place and shoot a big blob of spawning gang stars, rather than them being anything that requires much thought or creativity from the mission design team. Sweet's final mission is not gang war, but it might as fucking well be. It's an extended combat sequence where you gun down a shitload of guys in the streets in the name of retaking someone's house. You are then barred from accessing the game's final mission until you have taken at least 35% of all the gang territories in Los Santos. In other words, here's the final stretch of the game. It runs out of ideas, so it has you do the gang wars as actual missions a few times. Then it throws one last generic combat tunnel at you, and then it says that you have to piss off and grind out the gang wars until they're satisfied. The only difference between Sweet's missions and the gang wars that you have to do without his supervision are that they don't formalise the grind to 45% by claiming that they are also story missions. You just kind of do them on your own time, and then you get a story mission. This is honestly like if Vice City's last 3 missions were all just collecting hidden packages, and then after you'd done them all, Lance of Vance phoned you up to tell you that you needed to find 70 hidden packages in total before the final mission will unlock. It's certainly true that you had to do some of the asset missions to unlock that game's finale, but those asset missions were all totally different from each other, and they didn't just blatantly lift a side mission already in the game and pretend it was an exciting new adventure. Even the taxi company storyline doesn't do this, despite taxis being an existing vehicle mission. You get trapped in a murderous taxi hell pit in that storyline. It's weird and fun. San Andreas doesn't do anything like that. It just presents a very simple minigame as a mission like 3 times, and then it makes you do that minigame for another 2 hours to unlock the final mission. And it's a minigame where nothing ever changes, you just shoot 3 waves of gangsters over and over and over again until the game says that you've done enough. This is keeping in mind that at the start of the game, they'd already spent a mission to introduce and tutorialize the gang war stuff, so they've already pulled this minigame as a mission trick before. You see my problem, right? Where Vice City's just got more ideas floating around in it, while San Andreas' missions really easily fall off a cliff into the combat ravine. It repeats itself so much and so blatantly that you spend the last 2 to 3 hours of the game doing the same fucking thing over and over again, all to unlock a mission that is 90% combat, i.e. the thing you just spent hours grinding out to access it. It made the experience so much duller, so much less memorable, and so repetitive. And you know, again, San Andreas proves, on multiple occasions, that it still knows how to come up with a fucking concept here and there. I think its efforts on the RC vehicle front are quite piss poor this time around. Supply Lines is an awful, hateful little mission that takes everything that made the boat-bombing RC planes from Vice City fun and systematically sends it all down to a withered, vile husk of shitty controls and tiny fuel gauges. However, the follow-up, One Model Army, is a genius idea. You have to escort a little RC car across a model battlefield, using an RC helicopter to clear debris, build bridges, and take out tiny tanks. This is fun, it's novel, it's silly, it's actually a really, really cool idea that hasn't been done in all 3 of the PS2 games. I love it. I love it when San Andreas can muster up the energy to do something like this, but tragically it often doesn't. And in all honesty, maybe it's not that San Andreas doesn't have enough original ideas. It's possible that if you totaled it all up, the fun, weird gimmicks and ideas in this game might actually equal the number in Vice City. But this brings me on to my final issue with the storyline. The sheer fucking length. It's too goddamn long for its own goddamn good. I am aware of the irony, don't fucking quote my video lengths at me here. I am aware. It doesn't mean I ain't right. I can summarise this game's length problem very easily at least. Numerically no less. There are 25 story missions in Vice City that are mandatory for completing the main storyline. This is a slightly misleading number because to reach the finale, you need to complete the missions for at least 5 assets, including the printworks. So, let's take the absolute worst case scenario and pick the 4 assets with the most missions. So we take Kaufman Cabs, Interglobal Studios, The Printworks, Club Malibu, and then whatever you want for your fifth asset, since the remainder are all one-mission wonders. That's another 14 missions for a total of 39 to complete just the main story. Now then, in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, to complete the main storyline, you must complete 85 missions. Slightly more than Vice City, then. I was as fair as possible, and I've removed all of the optional storylines, just like with Vice City. I can even get ultra fair and wipe out the first, 5 or so missions of San Andreas, because they're mostly just driving from place to place and getting the plot dumped on you. And I'll even leave in Vice City's equivalent drive dumps to skew the numbers in San Andreas' favour as hard as I possibly can. That still leaves you with 80 to 39. So, again, double the fucking length. Let's say, for argument's sake, that 18 of those 39 Vice City missions could be called weird or gimmicky. I don't know if that's accurate, it doesn't terribly matter for the hypothetical. Now, let's just say that 18 of San Andreas' missions are similarly gimmicky. Same number, but the ratio looks a whole lot fucking worse with 80 missions as opposed to 39, right? That's kind of the whole problem. San Andreas' good ideas exist and are oftentimes quite fun, but they're drowned out by a large number of very samey, repetitive missions. They may well have had exactly the same number of fun ideas as in previous games, but the sheer length of the storyline makes them spread too thin. Just about every region of San Andreas has its own story arc that's quite long and involved, to the point where Los Santos and San Fierro actually have more missions in them, 29 and 26 respectively, than Vice City has mandatory story missions, not counting the assets. It's no fucking wonder that I think this game is a little bit long-winded and repetitive compared to Vice City then, right? I just don't think this kind of length works out for the storyline at all. It drags everything out far past the point of enjoyment for me. Vice City's storyline missions had brevity as one of their greatest strengths, both in mission length and mission count, and San Andreas reverses both of these things and adds in a shitload of samey content to boot. I know this is all probably rather shaky as arguments go. Maybe you'll tell me that most games focus entirely on their combat rather than gimmicks and they still do well, and I'll tell you that those kind of games usually have far deeper and more polished, enjoyable combat than GTA, but okay, whatever. I accept that you might half listen to my horrific fucking TED talk here and declare me a fool and a tit, but I just didn't enjoy playing through this game very much. Vice City is very deeply far from perfect. I will never defend missions like The Driver in that game. And San Andreas can absolutely match its quality at points. But I had so much more fun with Vice City than I did with San Andreas, which I think is a shame. I have now finished whining about the main storyline of this game. Let us now, at last, move on to the side missions, starting with all your returning vehicle friends. If you watched the last 2 videos, you know the drill and I will not dwell. So, Taxi. You drive people hither and thither, you make money. Still basically fine and enjoyable enough. They reduced the reward threshold from 100 to 50 fares, possibly because the larger map might make 100 fares a little bit hellish. You get the taxi jump from Vice City again, but it's been a bit nerfed, which is very sad. You do, however, unlock a nitro boost in all taxis, which is hilarious and stupid, and I love it. That shit's worth the trouble. Firefighter. You fight fires, you get money. They changed the controls and made it way more awkward than it used to be, which is an interesting choice, considering how lumbering and ponderous driving these things around already is in the other games. Basically, when they added manual camera control, they forgot that certain vehicles have functions attached to the right analog stick, and they do not accommodate for this by moving that function elsewhere. In the case of the fire truck, trying to move the hose now moves the camera with it, frequently causing you to lose sight of what you're trying to aim at as the camera whirls away to stare at some untextured skyscrapers. They then compound the awkwardness by changing how fires work, forcing you to actually hit the flames with your water, rather than vaguely spraying all over the car and hoping it works out as you could do before. This makes putting out flaming cars a bit dodgier than it used to be due to the extra precision you need, combined with the new stupid hose controls. Other than that, it's the same old shit, it's just worse to control. You still get being fireproof as a reward, and that is still really strange. It came in handy this time though, since I kinda sorta cheesed the final mission with it. Lovely stuff. Also, this happened, a guy got stuck on a hill. I had to do some maneuvers to help him cool off. Guess that's what they mean by finding a hill to die on. Thanks, I'm awful. Next, paramedic. Drive people to hospital, don't hit things or they die faster. Control's the same, mercifully. I did this in San Fierro rather than nice and early in Los Santos like I wanted to, because, unbeknownst to me, the gangs are immediately aggressive to CJ from moment 1 of this game, and the hospital in Los Santos is parked right in the middle of enemy gang territory. So, the first time I tried paramedic in this game, I got my ambulance shot to shit within seconds. Thanks, very kind, very... No, it's rude actually. Why do me like that? Come on, I'm being helpful, just leave me be. Anyway, shit's the same as always, except now your reward for completing it is the health boost you used to get from pizza delivery in Vice City. Sadly, I didn't get 75% of my patients sprawling on a single beach like with Vice City, so I had to actually try a little bit harder this time around. I still managed, though. Just about. Vigilante now. I didn't cheat this time. I didn't know where to get a hunter in this one, so I couldn't anyway. I actually had a lot more fun with this than I expected, possibly because they added police motorbikes in this game. You can shoot directly in front of you when you're on a bike, making drive-bys, well, drive-behinds, really. Chasing after fleeing crims is more fun when you can sit behind them and shoot, as opposed to awkwardly driving on the wrong side of the road, plinking away at them and hoping a truck isn't speeding towards you. I think what makes Vigilante fun on top of that is that you will inevitably attract a wanted level from all of your blatant murder, so it's this weird double-layered pursuit where you're a crim chasing crims, and you're being chased by the police. Makes things exciting in a way, weaving out of the way of frighteningly aggressive police cars trying to ram you off-road, as you blast away at the fleeing outlaws who are at this point less outside of the law than you are. You get the body armor upgrade again for this one. Hooray! Nice. Not dying. Almost a good one. Now we have... pimping. Oh dear. It's basically just taxi with the knowledge that someone's paying good money for 480p intercourse at the end of the commute. Like, literally, you just drop a girl off, you go find and drop off another girl, and then you go back and pick up the first girl and you drive her to another depressing client. That's it. Okay, every now and then you have to run a guy over because he didn't pay, which seems like a major flaw in the business strategy. Like, come on, half in advance at least, surely. But that's it. It's taxi with a more lurid theme. The reward is that ladies of the night will actually pay you for a roll in the hay. I do not wish to seem a prude, but I don't give a fuck about fucking. I'd have taken getting the fucking rocket boosts in the Pimpmobile instead. At least there's some lowbrow comedy to be found in the supersonic pimp. Oh well. Next is the courier missions. These are basically just Pizza Boy wearing a hat and toting around bags of what I choose to believe is simply normal sugar because it's funnier to me that way. You drive to the little red hoopy hoops, you throw the illegal cake ingredients at him, you drive back to the shop and you take home a mediocre paycheck. Unlike Pizza Boy, you don't refill your stash if you run out from botched throws in this version, you just end up failing outright. Other than that, though, they play basically identically. So, they're fine, I guess. The time limit is generous enough that it doesn't really give you much trouble. The worst that can happen is discovering CJ's fairly lacking throws can't always lurch through the hoop, even though you're right next to it, and that's about it. Your reward with all three variants of this, spread across the three cities, is that the businesses become assets for you and they generate a pathetic piss-in-the-wind's worth of cash. Better than nothing, in the literal sense that being given anything is better than nothing. Looking at you, gun range challenges. Looking at you and quietly flipping you off. There was a gun range in Vice City that I forgot to talk about, and I shall now correct this by saying that it was shit and I hated it. The one in San Andreas is slightly better, mostly by virtue of giving you infinite ammo and removing the time limit. You don't have to shakily aim your precious few bullets while grappling with the perpetually twitching, flicking helmbeast that is the GTA aiming sensitivity on a PS2 controller. You shoot apart each piece of a moving target, racing against two other competitors to finish the round first, either by destroying all of the targets or by reaching a total score of 20. For some reason, the game just makes you do all 4 gun courses in a row rather than one at a time, and one would assume that you would just pick the one you want to do and go from there, but no. It locks you in for the long haul, trapping your unsuspecting soul into bullet hell, but without any anime girls, so what's the fucking point? These challenges are a little bit boring, honestly, probably because it's literally the exact same challenge with the exact same setup 4 times in a row with 0 break. But they're not as aggravating as Vice City's, so there's that. Your reward for all of this is, as stated, fuck all. Thanks, I hate it. At least when Vice City threw a bucket of mouldy pasta sauce all over my nice new shirt and made me do its horrible gun range of the damned, I got ludicrously fast reload speeds out of it. Give me something, please, otherwise I feel a bit of a prick for even bothering. New to San Andreas is burglary, a vehicle mission you can only engage in at night. You sneak into people's houses, steal their limited edition clawed action figures, swoop out, violently toss them into your truck, and walk away laughing at your exciting new $80 steal. When sneaking through houses, you have to avoid touching objects or running around, otherwise you'll feel a noise meter that alerts the inhabitants and gets you into moderate bother. That's basically it, and it works decently, I guess. It's novel, as a concept at least. Although, the one time I did this mission, I stole someone's stereo, walked back in to steal their Vice City soundtrack box set along with it, and they were just standing there waiting to be mad at me because I allegedly stole their stereo. Don't know where they got that idea. I was very confused, as I believe I was quite careful to glide daintily through their house without stepping on any Lego and waking them up with my howls of pain, so I don't know what roused them here. Also, the game is real fucking snooty about what is or is not a thievable house. There are so many homes that I could invade and steal all of their dirty plates, and you're only gonna let me into like 2 per city block? Okay, thanks. One of those forbidden houses could have had an authentic replica of Tommy Vercetti's shirt in it, damn it, let me take a look. Ah, and if you get $10,000 worth of shit stolen in total, I believe you unlock infinite sprinting. I'm trusting the internet not to tell me porkies on that one. I'd have done it myself to confirm it, but for some arcane reason you don't need to do this mission to achieve 100% completion. As a lazy little shit who didn't care to grind out hours of $100 TVs, I chose to just say, fuck it, and not bother. If I don't need it for 100, I ain't doing it. So this brand new, pretty novel mechanic is tossed overboard on the trip to 100%, but, upsettingly enough, the vehicle schools are not. There are 4 vehicle schools in the game, 4 cars, bikes, boats, and planes. Each school sets you a series of tasks revolving around trying to pull off a slick maneuver while the game's physics engine kicks back with some popcorn and starts jeering at you for the entire duration. I think we all know that GTA's physics and driving controls are somewhat suspect by this point. That they are malicious and cruel, and that all it takes is a single wayward pebble on the road to send you spiralling into a tree, bursting into flames, causing a forest fire, and possibly knocking CJ's hat slightly askew. Imagine 4 different side activities where the game demands that you place your life and sanity in that fiend's hands, and do fucking barrel rolls in a car while driving off a ramp, or you drive on 2 wheels all the way to a finish point, and now imagine my trembling hands and quivering lips as I find out that this is what the game wants me to fucking ace in the name of 100% completion. All 4 of them! I almost cried. I must say though, bold stuff of them to say, fucking do this horrible, stupid thing that your car hates you trying to do, and then they whip out a clipboard and say, oh, and you have to do it properly or you fail. The game is rather precise about these things. Finicky, some would say. Do not touch these cones. Do not hit anything with your car. Make sure your car is facing the exact, precise, correct direction when you finish it, you fucking F-student dunce. The one and only silver lining to this cruelty is that you do not need to achieve a gold medal on all the tasks to earn 100% completion. Thanks, Thanks, fuck this, fuck all of it, never try to educate me again, I hate this. I don't even know how I did this fucking 2 wheels task, it makes zero sense. Don't even get me started on the stoppie, as the kids call it, a motorcycle maneuver that for some reason only lets you move forward if you stop accelerating, which seems slightly counterintuitive from my clearly foolish perspective. In my naivete, I assumed that the vehicle schools were the worst shit that I'd have to scoop out of the clogged toilet. Unfortunately, they merely concealed the greasy, semi-liquid twin disasters that are the arena and the races. Let's do the arenas first, eh? Much of this is a carryover from the Vice City arena, although this time they did not call it the Hyman arena, which is a very minor improvement. Cue the moment where I realised that the one in San Andreas is called the fucking Scrote Zone or something. The 2 returning events are the dirt bike checkpoint thing and the blood ring. The dirt bike checkpoints are a lot worse in this one because there's an actual hard time limit and the terrain's a lot dodgier to navigate. I'm serious, some of this shit is practically non-functional, and I'd love to know how a reasonable human being is meant to navigate a shaky-ass GTA dirt bike along these precarious pencil-thin lines. I would rather take my sweet time in Vice City's version, oddly enough. The blood ring should be the same, but for some reason feels far worse. You drive towards checkpoints that extend a draining clock, aiming to get your total time over 1 minute. Other contestants will eagerly, viciously ram you out of the way of these checkpoints, all to let someone else steal it from you. This makes sense if you just want to fuck the player over at every turn by having a dozen cars constantly slamming into their back tyre. It is ludicrous in the context of the competition, because these people are honestly sabotaging their own chances of winning just to keep me away from the trophy. It's very vindictive and just plain mean. Plus, when there's so many cars in the arena and the checkpoints spawn so randomly, it is honestly luck whether or not you can even reach one checkpoint. Wherever they spawn, free cars are usually already directly on top of it, because there are just so many. I only won because on that particular attempt, the game wasn't really feeling up to it today, so it just dropped 3 checkpoints right next to each other in a row and declared there, randomly spawned, done, I'm on break. Every other failed attempt was either my car blowing up from the AI's sheer aggression, or my time running out because the spawns worked so blatantly in their favour. It ain't a great mission, and getting knocked around so much makes me feel a bit carsick. This was nothing compared to the dirt bike race and the hot ring, and, well, let me tell you, I'm pretty sure someone squeezed these 2 events right out of their hot ring, alright. Thanks, that's what, my 30th shit joke? I've probably got a lot more brewing. I've been trained on Rockstar's brand of non-humour, I'm sorry. So, these 2 races have basically the same problems as each other. These are, the handling is akin to the car being made of completely drenched soap gliding across an endless oil slick. The AI is hyper-competent and will consistently pull off insane, precise turns like they're in the final arc of a fucking Initial D reboot. On top of this, the AI is hyper-aggressive, and will go out of its way to ram you or spin you out just to let the guy in first maintain his lead. It will stretch its rubber bands to the very limits of elasticity, ensuring that every competitor is always breathing right up your arse and never relenting. The terrain is either bumpy as shit, or slippery as shit, or both. And lastly, you cannot see anything. I am so very serious. Both races have a weird issue with half the course being in fucking pitch blackness. I genuinely could not see some of the corners in the dirt bike race. I had to go out and find one of the very, very few spawn points in the game for night vision goggles just to make a proper attempt at the races. Even then, I still had to contend with my bike contriving incredible new flips and flops, spinning out of control in ways that beggar belief and pilfer the piddle, utterly, pathetically desperate to fling me off and cost me the race. This is to say nothing of the hilariously low durability of your hot ring car, which is constantly and perpetually assaulted on all sides, but is very delicate and frail. I relate strongly to being delicate and frail, emotionally, anyway. But come on! I never actually lost the race by completing it too slowly. It was always because my car blew up halfway through. It's fucking Christ almighty. Incidentally, 12 laps is a long old time when you're having a miserable experience. These races absolutely sucked shit and did nothing but make me want to weep. So, of course, hiding somewhere behind them is about 20 more races, each one a hideous mockery of the concept of fun, and every single one of these bastard beasts required for the coveted 100% completion. Each city has a selection of wonderful, magical races to sap your soul and love for video games away at a rapid pace. I hate each and every one of them with a certain manic fervour. I did not mind Vice City's races, although the elephant memoried among you may recall that I copped to cheating by blowing up all the other contestants back then. Having done the San Andreas races legitimately, using only my own guile and a massive shipment of Lady Luck's finest fortune cookies, I do not regret cheating for a fucking second, and I'd do it again. So, let's take two of the classic features of the shitty arena races. The obnoxious, aggressive, ultra-competent, blatantly, shamelessly rubber-banding AI, and the god-awful handling. Now you swap out the dark, barely visible track with bizarre, physics-bending terrain, and replace it with the far simpler issue of these races all taking place on the bustling streets of San Andreas, where turning a blind corner will send you face first into an oncoming truck, no matter what you do. You gotta deal with traffic now. Well, can't say I approve of all of that. I'd like to assure you that every single one of these races is shit, and awful, and broken, to the point where the AI can actually flip their cars and blow up, or fall off cliffs, and the game is so fucking obnoxious about this that they'll just pop back into existence directly behind you like nothing happened. They won't even let the other cars fuck up. But I'd like to keep this focused. Let's examine one of the very first Los Santos races, entitled, quite simply, Little Loop. How appropriate. It drove me fucking loopy. On the surface, Little Loop shouldn't be that tortuous. Putting aside the fact that it's a race and it's in the Grand Theft Auto game, which are two grievous crimes punishable by catapult on their own, it's, short. It's a little loop after all, and you have a very fast bike. It shouldn't take long at all, I said, naive and untainted by sin. Let me tell you about Little Loop. In Little Loop, you are provided an NRG 500, probably the fastest bike in the entire game. Under decent, morally upright circumstances, that'd be the end of it. Bike go vroom, crash into lamppost by accident, bike go boom. Such is life on the mean streets of Los Santos. For some fucking reason, in races, and races only, the NRG 500 is deliberately engineered to be a rampaging stallion of the plains, determined to buck and flail and send your delicate skull zooming towards its dire nemesis, concrete. The second you accelerate on this thing, it starts tipping backwards, coming perilously close to actually flipping over. As the race goes on and you have to ascend these hills, you discover this initial jerk back was no idle threat, but a grim promise. Because you just fucking fall off your fucking bike and lose the fucking race because the fucking guy in first fucking place will peel ahead of you at like fucking speed, and a single mistake means you will never, ever, ever fucking catch up to the fucker, and you know what I fucking say to that fucking shit? Well, that's pretty hecking annoying. I thought I must be doing something wrong, like maybe I kept accidentally tilting backwards on my controller and it was making CJ perform deadly wheelies without my knowledge. Like bike skill, maybe? That hated fiend knocking on the window and flipping me off again? Needed higher bike skill to not fall over on the ultimate bike? It makes sense in a stupid, horrible way. No, the explanation is somehow worse. You ever get stuck on some really annoying, awkward part of a game and you would swear that for whatever reason, a thing that normally works perfectly fine is just not working, but only for this specific segment. And you can't prove it's worse, it's just this gut feeling that in the bit you're shit at, the game suddenly makes itself harder to play. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas confirmed to me that this feeling must be real in at least some cases in my life. All I have as evidence is the GTA wiki on this, but... and I quote, "It has been noted that vehicles often behave differently in races than they do during regular driving, such as more violent reactions to hitting obstacles, greater tendency to flip, or less resistance to damage. So if the player is intimately familiar with, for example, the NRG 500 bike, they should be prepared for the bike to handle differently during the Little Loop race, such as the added tendency to do wheelies when accelerating. This is a paragraph that speaks to me of madness and buffoonery beyond mortal reckoning. Dark energies emanate from the forbidden knowledge it gives me. Rockstar, what the billy blue fuck are you doing? I ask because this is not something that can happen by accident. If the handling on an NRG 500 was almost the most ill-fitting pair of clown shoes in the store, then my design critique would be quite easy. It would be, fuck off, don't give me the bike with the shittiest handling for the race. But I know how it handles, and it handles better than this outside of races, which implies that this was a deliberate, conscious tweak to the handling in physics that is universal across all races, and then ceases to exist outside of this nightmare realm. Like, do I even do with that information? That someone said, oh no. The challenge of racing the machine god AI through oncoming traffic is not enough. What we need to do is silently and unexpectedly cut their fucking brakes while they aren't looking, just to ensure that the cars are more prone to crashing. And so this brings it all back to the case study of Little Loop. Thanks to Rockstar's petty, malicious physics fondling, I cannot drive this fucking motorbike up hills. The first quarter of this race is primarily of a hilly persuasion. Your competitors are not affected by the bizarre new physics, of course, so they drive up the hill with zero resistance. When I go down the hill, my bike finds the concept of straight lines blasé, and decides to experiment with launching off into unwanted, uncharted new directions. The AI is always perfect, always as fast as possible, and never relents. Your bike conspires against your every move, but your every move must be perfect to keep up with them. If you see any AI crashing its car in this footage, and you think I'm stupid enough to lie whilst being disproven live on camera, what I really mean is that the guys in first and second place are maddeningly competent. Everyone else exists to crash and cause roadblocks, or to sacrifice themselves by slamming into you, which is a deeply unpleasant combination. The races are all deeply, deeply unpleasant. Every land-based race is despicable. I see their mandatory 100% completion status, while something more benign like burglary is left out in the cold with naught but a van and an $80 stereo, as an act of unjust cruelty upon the world at large. I've separated out the air-based races because they're actually just those old checkpoint challenges from Vice City. No time limit, just fly for the hoops. Sadly, this sucks fucking shit because the handling's awful, and oh my god, the barnstorming challenge, oh man, oh Jesus Christ, God in heaven, I've run out of religious swearing there. This one took me some time. Let's leave it as, this thing cannot turn, but all the game ever demands of me is the sharpest turns possible. Turns that could slice a man's finger off in a single stroke, and I just cannot measure up. It's awful. The races are insipid and shitty, and I wish I could cheat at them like I could in Vice City. I'm sorry, I totally can. For 3 of them. See, there's these downhill bike races from the top of Mount Chiliad here. I hate them because copy-paste most or all of my fucking descent into madness here, you know, handle bad, robot computer man, too good at video game, make me grumpo, etc. I'd just like to announce that if you sit at the finish line for these 3 races and let everyone beat you, you can just get off your bike and snipe all of them. The game will consider this close enough to winning and just let you have it. I did it properly for 2 out of the 3. On the last race, I could actually feel my spirit shattering into tiny pieces by the 10 hours of races I'd been subjected to, so I cheated and I'd do it again. You will never stop me from being petty about races. Let us slide on over to the vehicle challenges and leave the races in the flaming dumpster they were birthed from. I remember being really pleased with Vice City for only really having one of the awful, get on these awkward checkpoints sneering at you from their bizarre perches, while a tiny time limit dwindles away at monstrosities. San Andreas has 2 of them, which is a shame. Still better than GTA 3 though, in number and quality. You've got a bicycle one, and the return of the NRG 500, now with the handling that God intended for it. The bicycle one is like almost totally fine, other than this one checkpoint where you have to try and get on top of this half pipe. Is this a half pipe? I don't know. I'm old. The bike doesn't enjoy this very much. I don't enjoy what the bike does to try and get out of it very much either. It will not behave itself, and it cost me a perfectly good attempt on the back of its nonsense. Obscene. Dreadful stuff. Then there's the Energy 500 version. Well, at least it doesn't handle like it does in the races. You have to drive directly at the wall and hope you can launch the bike in the correct trajectory to catch these mid-air rings. I'll be frank here. This is not the worst vehicle challenge the games have ever thrust upon me, but it's not great. It's kind of hard to determine where you're going to end up when you launch off the sides, and your bike doesn't really behave exactly how you'd want it to. Like, it can clip very slightly and just spin off in an odd direction quite easily. Driving vertically up a wall to blindly leap at rings just doesn't really work all that amazingly. It can be frustrating. However, it's a shitload above anything GTA 3 ever did, and I will live with that kind of meagre victory. Alright, so to finish off the general vehicle missions segment, let's look somewhat quickly at the 4 final vehicle missions. Valet, Trucker, Freight, and Quarry. In Valet, you are a valet. You drive people's cars to a parking spot in a hotel car park, and then you run back to the front door and you drive a new car. There are other valets working at the hotel, and they can take cars from you if you're not quick enough. If you damage the car while you're driving it, you will earn less bonus time, which means that your time limit will be a little smaller. There is nothing wrong with valet, mostly because there's almost nothing to it. The second you do a single parking job and sprint back, you have done it all. Valet is a solved equation. Nothing about valet ever escalates in any way. You don't get pickier drivers, or drivers who want you to, go do something with their car and then return it. Maybe they're like, hey, go pick me up some food and then bring my car back, while expecting it to be totally pristine. Anything that would change the gameplay up at all is just absent. There's 5 levels of valet, but they're all just about parking slightly more cars than the last level. The problem there is there's one optimal parking method that almost gives you way more time than you'll spend doing the parking job, making the mission basically unlosable no matter how many cars you need to park. It feels kinda half-baked. Trucker fares better in this regard. You drive a large truck with attached cargo to a destination. Each level of the trucker mission changes the requirements up a little. In some levels you have a time limit, in others you've got to deliver the goods without damaging them in any way. Sometimes you're transporting San Andreas copies with hot coffee still installed on them, and you have to avoid the police while making this highly illegal delivery. You have to take care to ensure that they don't blow you up or cause your cargo to detach from the truck. This is basically what Valet needed. Every mission you do is at least slightly different, even if it's just a hard version of a previously seen mission type. There's variety, there's escalating challenge, there's embarrassing incidents where you get stuck in a tunnel and you cannot reattach your cargo at all because Johnny Law keeps nudging it slightly askew, which is really childish behaviour for policemen, quite frankly. Trucker is pretty decent overall. Next is Freight, where you drive a train. You press X to make it go round the track. When you are near a station, you should brake and try and land in the red marker. If you don't, it's fine, the train can reverse. The time limit seems intimidating for about 2 seconds until you realise the train is, on a track. So you will always make it, provided you just hold down X. Allegedly, going too fast will derail your train. I have yet to find out what the danger speed is, and so my train keeps a-rolling with no resistance. This mission barely has any gameplay, so it's hard to judge its quality. It sure does let you drive a train. Yep. So, last up is Quarry. Quarry is actually its own little storyline of sorts, which sets it apart from every other vehicle mission in the series. You start out using a bulldozer to push boulders off a cliff to clear a path, and you might think every mission is going to be just this, but with more boulders and possibly someone lobbing eggs at your windshield so you can't see what you're doing, but no, it's actually pretty different every time. It's like, hey, good. You moved the boulders, but a very rude individual has put bombs in the vicinity, and that's bad for PR, please move them. Then you're carting bodies into the quarry and dumping them into a fire to burn them, or you're using the magnetic crane to lift another body and a motorcycle into your truck so you can dump them both in the ocean. There's a lot of effort put in to make every new mission unique and craft a very small, threadbare narrative throughout the whole thing. I appreciate that effort. As you may have detected, I enjoy gimmicks and variety in GTA. If I'm going to force in the complaints, though, here's two. The dumper trucks tip out their contents if you use the right analog stick, which, need I remind you, is traditionally associated with the goddamn camera. Which led to a rather embarrassing incident wherein I clambered into my truck, ready to discreetly dispose of some corpses. I poked my analog stick to have a little glance around, and didn't notice I'd just tipped the thing upwards. I drove about 2 feet forward, and every single corpse slid gracelessly off, and I failed instantly. The effect was like I just filmed my own crime sitcom, and the laugh track was playing over CJ cluelessly driving off with 0 corpses in his truck. I felt a bit of a prick there. I choose to blame Rockstar, against all the evidence indicating it's my fault. The other complaint's pretty simple, and it's just that when you gotta push a shit like bikes and yet more corpses around for your bulldozer, the physics get a bit uncomfortable with you and they don't comply. They keep sliding around in weird directions that don't make tremendous sense, or somehow finding a way to burrow themselves underneath your bulldozer, which is quite impressive, really. It's a little silly. Other than that, I think Quarry's probably the best of the new vehicle missions. I appreciate how much effort it has compared to most of the other ones. Here's me ruining my own life by flopping straight into some water after the game specifically instructed me not to flop into any water. Just so you know what kind of skill level you're dealing with here. And now let's look at the collectibles. Previous games had the 100 hidden packages, and that was all they needed to keep you going. San Andreas expands this to 100 graffiti tags, 50 snapshots, 50 horseshoes, and 50 oysters. The graffiti, snapshots, and horseshoes all give you roughly the same benefits, but their mechanics differ slightly. You find the graffiti tags of rival gangs scattered around Los Santos, and you then spray over them by writing a provocative yet true statement, like Vice City was the better game, on top of their tag. 100 times. CJ's wrists must be feeling a little raw, and his shoes are presumably caked in 8 layers of radioactive ooze green by now. I kinda like how a few of the tags take advantage of the new climbing mechanics by requiring you to climb onto a roof, or use a car as a little boosty stool to reach a higher spot. That's nice. Shame you can't make a Grove Street member give CJ a cutesy piggyback to do it, though. 100 tags feels slightly excessive when you've got another 150 things to shove into your bag of random shit throughout the game, though. Probably would have been better to just, shrink it down to 50, especially when you consider the reward. It's 4 guns in CJ's house. Just plops a little shotgun on the table to give the room a subtle tinge of danger. And that's what you get for 100 tags hidden in obscure spots throughout the entire Los Santos area. See, the 4 weapons thing is also true of the snapshots and horseshoes, and I'm going to criticise that in a moment, but it's less galling when you're only doing half the busy work. 100 tags for 4 guns is a pretty poor exchange rate. 50 is better. It's almost a 1-to-1 rate, in fact, although it's still below par. Okay, so snapshots involve you taking pictures of random landmarks around San Fierro, or in most cases, taking pictures of some random bit of bunting or slightly overflowing bin that the game is pretending is a landmark. To have it count as a collected snapshot, you often need to get a small pink icon within the frame, although sometimes no icon appears at all, and you're just meant to take a picture of something and hope it'll count. So the consistency isn't very good. Figuring out what you're meant to be taking photos of is kind of hard, because you can't see the pink icon until you're already looking at something through your camera. So to do this blind, you need to roam around with your camera smashed against your face like you're an obnoxious tourist, until a flash of pink pops into your periph. Unless it's one of the ones where no icon appears at all, in which case go fuck yourself. The idea is like a novel twist on the old GTA collectible side quest, but I think the execution dampens it a bit. They're too awkward to look for without help. Horseshoes, on the other hand, are pretty much fine. They're just plain old hidden packages scattered throughout Las Venturas. What I like about horseshoes is that they feel like they're placed with the jetpack in mind. You unlock the jetpack just before reaching Las Venturas in the storyline, so they expect you to want to play around with it for a bit. And when you do, you can start stumbling onto these horseshoes. And that's good, that's nice. I even like how you can't really use a helicopter to do this instead. Like, they're really intent on this being a jetpack-themed adventure. A lot of the higher-up horseshoes are on thin walkways that you'd have to try and clumsily skydive onto from a helicopter and inevitably humiliate yourself in the process, so using the jetpack's the only viable option. That actually kind of resolves my criticism about Vice City's hidden package placements being spoilt by helicopters. So that's nice. Horseshoes are the best collectible, I'd say. Then there's oysters, which are just sort of shoved underwater throughout San Andreas. Sometimes in the ocean, sometimes in rivers, sometimes in small garden ponds. Finding them can be kind of a chore, guide or no guide, since the draw distance underwater ain't amazing, and it's easy to lose them within all the nondescript blue. If you collect them all, you for some reason become an unstoppable sex lord and can now blast through the requirements any of the potential girlfriends might have. Apparently, oysters just remove standards. Okay, so about the rewards for the first 3 collectible types. They ain't enough. See, GTA 3 and Vice City had a perfect setup. 100 packages, 1 reward every 10 packages, 10 rewards in total. That's just enough space between rewards to make you feel like you're earning something, not just being handed it for fuck all, but it's frequent enough to keep you motivated. It's exhausting to know that you're getting nothing until you've sprayed tag number 100. Like, just this long expanse of zero benefit for what you're doing, until finally, at 100 tags, it all gets dumped on your head at once. The old system was so much better at incentivizing you because you'd get something, even just a little thing, like now, with the promise of more later. It's energizing to know that one more hidden package is going to give you that busted as fuck revolver. That busted as fuck revolver is absent from San Andreas, and this makes me a little bit pouty. Also, because the rewards are split between each city's collectibles, you can't scoop up every weapon type in one convenient swoop like you could in Vice City, where every weapon reward is helpfully parked in one of your 3 major safe houses. You only have to make 1 trip in Vice City, but in this, you gotta drive to Los Santos for the shotgun, and then you gotta go to San Fierro for a submachine gun and a sniper rifle. Splitting the rewards apart from each other like this makes them feel less rewarding. Like, you'll only ever get a tiny fraction of what you've earned without wasting time commuting between cities. And you might say, oh, I'll just go buy guns, and I'm like, well, okay, but then what's the fucking point of giving me these freebies, if I have to buy half my guns anyway? On a simpler note, I think it's just kind of lame to only have 12 rewards for the 200 collectibles that give you weapon spawns. 100 to 10 is a perfect ratio. Doubling that count and only providing 2 new things is kinda shitty. I will now discuss the import-export side quest. Find car, take car to crane, put car on boat, receive monetary compensation. Eventually you can import some unique cars, which is fine, I guess. I had a bad time finding some of the cars just because I had shitty luck with their spawns. You know you're on a bad spawning streak when you're in the countryside, where trucks make up a solid 50% of the traffic, and you genuinely cannot find any fucking trucks. It's like the game knows what I want, and it just pushes all the trucks off a cliff while I'm not looking, and then it shrugs at me. My opinion of this whole thing is a little low, just because I had such a poor run of luck. You may call that petulant. So would I, but I'd say it with a certain shit-headed pride. Right, let's look at girlfriends. One odd sentence. So, basically you can date girls, which the game interprets as driving her to a place and then driving her home. I believe at least one of these places is a club in which one can, in fact, show her your moves. In my time with my friends who are girls, I did not encounter this exciting opportunity. I just drove them to a local eatery and got to watch some horrendous fucking attempt at a tender romantic moment play out before me. I've seen better, shall we say. This whole mechanic does not have much to it. It is repetitive and about as shallow as it can get. You do the same thing every time with every girlfriend. Once you know what restaurant type she prefers, I mean that's it, you're fucking done. You just drive on over and gently squish a pizza into her face and ask if she can taste the pepperoni yet, every single time. I think this entire thing exists in the name of giving someone an ego boost, and I think it may have been whoever wrote the text prompts for this stuff. Soon, she will be powerless to resist. It ominously intones, like you're trying to mind control her. There's something oddly sinister about some of these messages. Also, the girlfriend stuff is where that hot coffee thing emerged from, where you find out exactly what she is powerless to resist. And it turns out it was CJ's penisless wonder crotch grinding against her equally featureless crotch. The vestiges of hot coffee still remain in the text prompts, encouragingly telling you that you are in fact the man. Thank you, GTA. Thank you for the compliment. I do try. This is why I think the guy who wrote this stuff might have been having a bad day. Like, maybe his girlfriend never told him she was powerless to resist his warlock magics, and it just dug away at him. The most upsetting thing about this very boring mechanic, whose most entertaining feature is the strange text prompts, is that it's actually very helpful for the core gameplay. Some of the girls you can date grant you stupidly overpowered benefits if you get their love meter to 100%. One of them lets you keep your weapons when you die, which is something of a game changer. I didn't bother acquiring that on this playthrough because girlfriends are another thing that the game just lets us slide on your path to 100% completion. But I mean, if I was going to torture myself watching the camera shiver at the implications of CJ's impressive coffee drinking technique for anything, it'd be for that. That's real good. There's an equivalent one for getting busted too, but dying is more likely, if we're honest. I still think this mechanic's a bit shit, though. I do not care if nice guys finish last, and I do not care if I am or am not the man. Apropos of nothing, I'd like to announce that rampages are missing from this game, and that's a shame, since Vice City had, just made them mostly good. You'd think the game that pushed to the combat so much would love to include, 60 rampages, but no. It's weird. Oh, but unique jumps are still in this. Not needed for 100%, so I didn't do them. This game's standards on what constitutes completing 100% of the game are very strange. It rolls out the red carpet for the races, all 24 of those miserable fucking cretins, but it makes this whole dating mechanic with 6 different characters, and that doesn't matter. And it has 70 unique jumps this time, and not a single one of them is considered relevant to proceedings, and it made burglary and attached infinite sprinting to it, but nah, get out of my fucking face with that. I don't know why it says 100% completion and then shrugs its shoulders and says it really means 75%, but 100 just looks tidier as a number, you know? But as my final gameplay thing, here's what you get for 100% completion in this game. Infinite ammo, double durability on your vehicles, plus a tank and a fighter jet to spawning at Grove Street. That's fun. Although I miss getting a shitty t-shirt out of the deal, so no dice, Vice City wins. Even if San Andreas' tank is easier to get to. Sorry, can I talk about the Rhino for a sec? Because San Andreas ruined it a little bit. You used to control the turret with the right analog stick, but that's still mapped to camera controls when you get into a Rhino. Their solution was that moving the camera moved the turret as well, the problem being that the second you let the camera return to a neutral position, the turret just snaps back to the front. It's really hard to aim the turret at anything now. You can only really easily fire straight ahead of you. If you want to do that goofy physics trick where firing behind you will propel the Rhino forwards, you have to be looking behind you the entire time, meaning you'll just crash into a wall or off of a cliff eventually. They had to do nothing to the Rhino to keep it fun, and they chose to do something and spoilt it. It'll be illegal, that kind of thing. Right, next, here's the obligatory bit about the map size. San Andreas is a lot bigger than either GTA 3 or Vice City. I largely don't mind this, since the main areas of interest are the 3 cities, and each one is roughly equivalent to a previous GTA city in scale. It's not like one massive city of fuck all, it's 3 decently sized cities with decent amounts of stuff spread between them. I personally prefer Vice City as a map and location because the sheer smallness really creates a certain amount of density in the content, but this is still, it's still fine. I can see the increased scale being a draw. It occupies something of a middle ground between the real tiny maps previous GTA games had, and the bloated infinite expanses of lovingly rendered fuck all the average open world of today foists upon you. Having said that, San Andreas is definitely starting to lean towards what I don't like about larger open world games. The countryside and the desert feel largely empty. They're boring, there's little to do in them, and they can make driving from city to city something of a slog. The countryside roads in particular are so long and winding and roundabout that I still have to check the map to see where the fuck I'm going. They're not the worst. The desert has fun points of interest and or getting easily murdered, like Area 69. Of course it's 69. Of course. Look, all I'm saying is, at least you can go to the automatic high wanted level zone and get your eggs fairly cracked open, so there's still some fun to be had in these areas, but they do feel a bit bland and empty compared to the cities. I suppose they're a necessity to create the proper sense of scale, like, you need some transitional zone between the cities or else it just looks stupid, but I think they could have been a little more interesting. I kind of see them as essentially blank space on the map. If you remember, back in the day there was all that bullshit where people claimed that you can totally see Bigfoot in the woods, guys, you know, all that Muse under the truck nonsense designed only to make some gullible kiddies waste a day trying to find it. I think to an extent people latched on to Bigfoot is real because he'd make the countryside more interesting as a place. There'd be this really weird Easter egg, you know, suddenly all that forest is fun and mysterious instead of just, empty. Maybe that's unfair. I don't find these zones great, regardless. On a more positive note, and one that kind of lets me sidle up to the graphical end of the game, they do capture the tone of Los Santos and San Fierro quite well as Los Angeles and San Francisco surrogates. The very specific mood of, like, LA as filtered through a gritty gang drama in particular, as opposed to just LA as a place, is done pretty strongly. I like San Fierro's brighter, cheerier mood overall because I'm a fucking hippie. I like all my rainbow banners and nice green hills and trams, you know, that shit's cool, but Los Santos is still like a good locale. I feel Las Venturas fares a little worse purely because it wants to be Vegas, but it doesn't quite measure up, I think. You tell me Vegas, you tell me casinos, I tell you I want to be fucking blinded with ugly neon, and unfortunately, the PS2 probably wasn't the console that could pull this off, especially with GTA's general graphical quality. Again, possibly unfair, but I just think Los Santos and San Fierro do a better job at capturing their general vibes. The tacky themed casinos and hotels are actually a really good effort, though. I still like Vice City's general visual style and atmosphere more, though. Like, granted, San Andreas does look a little better on a purely technical level. It's a little more detailed, the characters are inching a teeny bit further away from deformed monstrosity territory, all that's all good. Or better. But I was more into Vice City's bright, colourful 1980s Miami thing than San Andreas' a slightly grittier, darker, shithole LA theme. I'm more into mobsters than street gangs, I guess. More into Yakuza than mobsters, but that's neither here nor there. Not saying you can't like San Andreas' look more, just my personal preference. This is also how I feel about the musical selection this time. Again, on a detached level, it's good at what it does. And they emphasise the rap and they give it a few different stations, that's good. They have the period-appropriate tunes you'd probably hope and expect. Great, sure. I don't like 90s music nearly as much as 80s music as a general preference, so San Andreas' soundtrack honestly doesn't appeal to me, like, at all. Back in Vice City, I had Emotion 98.3 on loop for hours, but I would occasionally wander towards V-Rock, or Fever 105, or Wave 103. Like, I had options for indulging my bullshit there because I liked most of the stations. In San Andreas, I like CSR, actually. That's a good station. But then I kind of run out of steam immediately. I do not enjoy Them Bones by Alice in Chains, but every single time I tune into Radio X, Them Bones is playing, and I do not enjoy Them Bones at all. Remove these skeletons from my sight, thanks. I miss Emotion, okay? I miss Fernando Martinez in all of his horrible, punchable glory. I miss Cutting Crew. I really like I Just Died in Your Arms Tonight, and it's not in this game. I need the emotional music. So full disclosure, while I was doing most of the optional content for this game, I muted it and I put my own fucking jams on. I made the 80s come home, and no one can tell me to do otherwise. If you like San Andreas' soundtrack, I mean, I can hardly argue with that, can I? You like what you like. I just happen to like really cheesy 80s love ballads, okay? I like to feel emotional. And thus we come to our final chapter in this dreadful lecture. The story, and I guess by extension, the writing in general. San Andreas is an ambitious game in many ways. The size of its map, the scope of trying to capture 3 distinct cities, the sheer number of mechanics it added. The story, I think, is another part of that. GTA 3 had essentially 0 plot. Vice City had a plot, but an incredibly simplistic one where Tommy Vercetti shouts at people until they're either dead or paying him. San Andreas really wants to tell something approaching a real story, like lay down some crime drama on everyone. You can tell because CJ as a character sort of like vaguely resembles a real human being this time. He isn't the cartoonish murder boner man Vercetti is, and CJ and Claude have now interacted in canon, and I think CJ kind of came out the winner on that one. Initially, CJ's got like internal conflict. He has, in his own words, been living clean for years, but his feelings of loyalty to his family, especially now with their mother dying, leads him to being dragged back into a life that he thought he left behind. No, look, a real character. Yes, he has flaws and shit. He has to own up to the fact that he abandoned his family when they were emotionally vulnerable, and he has come home like he thinks they won't have an issue with that, and they totally do. You know, decent ideas are going on. Of course, as the game goes on, CJ basically just evolves into a more boring, less angry Tommy Vercetti as the needs of a GTA story force him into the role. Ultimately, GTA only really works when the protagonist is a psychopath of some flavour, and the story really needs to be written to accommodate that. CJ has to be willing to accept random, wanton murder as the best solution to his problems, and he has to be capable of doing that. You gotta believe that he's stupid enough to break into a military base to steal a jetpack. See, this is all well and good, but the game absolutely does not set him up for this. He's written to be more complex than the game allows him to be. The gap between the CJ who's got all these familial problems and conflicting emotions, and the GTA player who's making him be a massive asshole all the time is quite huge. Tommy Vercetti did not have this issue because he was tailor-made to just be a simple, angry, power-hungry asshole. He doesn't start out more complex and then have to get sanded down as the story demands, like CJ does. The plot as a whole is such low-stakes, small potatoes shit that it just gets a little bizarre when CJ is stealing fighter jets or gunning down police by the dozens. Because 2 of the major driving forces of the plot are, oh no, my brother's been wrongfully imprisoned, and oh no, these 2 bent cops are framing me for murdering another cop. CJ's quest to get Sweet out of jail, I'll let slide. Like, let's just call it him being so devoted to his brother that he'll do, like, any fucking nonsense shit to get him out, right? But then we come to Tenpenny and Pulaski, the 2 cops keeping him under their big shared thumb. From the first cutscene of the game, we know they have power over CJ. They shake him down and threaten him with pinning their own murders on him. CJ is helpless against these 2 officers of the law. Except, you can, will, must, constantly, endlessly murder cops in this game, and CJ does not fear this. In Los Santos alone, there's a mission where you gun down a lot of fucking cops, so let's just take this information and now we fucking lose an entire plot point, don't we? Because CJ's in fear and totally outraged that Tenpenny and Pulaski would frame him for murdering a cop. Well, excuse the fuck out of me, Mr. Johnson, my mistake. I wouldn't want to mix him up with the 20 other cops he ran over today. So Tenpenny and Pulaski's major piece of leverage over him, the threat of that murder charge, is stupid because this is a game where CJ has committed this murder hundreds of times over. CJ can't believe he's been framed unjustly for a crime he didn't commit, so let's just go commit shitloads of more crime to prove that we aren't doing any crime. This also brings us to the second silly thing. If CJ can kill so many cops with ease, why doesn't he just kill 2 more and remove this entire problem? He's got no qualms about murder already, so you can't give me that one. You do, of course, end up killing both of them, but CJ's decision to flip and just go after them feels really arbitrary. Tenpenny's a random cop, not the drug kingpins and mob bosses Vercetti faced off against. I know this is very basic gameplay narrative incongruity here, like, it's a joke everyone's cracked about some game at some point, but I think it bears some examination because you can clearly see the divide in the story between San Andreas the crime drama and San Andreas the crime romp, you know? Tommy Vercetti just didn't have that conflict, he's all romp all the time. But I think this game's story suffers for it, because it has to pull CJ in 2 very different directions. Leaning in and just making CJ a full-on crime wizard like Tommy would have helped a lot, since it just fits much better with the tone and gameplay of these games. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it. Lastly, let's just be blunt, I don't think the game is funny, okay? I don't. I said some fairly similar stuff about Vice City, but I came away a little more mixed from that. Like, yeah, naming your band Love Fist and then building more fairly limp sex puns from there wasn't great. Like, yeah, the gay jokes, the lots of groups jokes, not great. But I defended some of its humour, and I'll defend VCPR as a radio station forever. I don't think San Andreas has anything of that calibre. The crap, low-hanging fruit puns persist in all of their boringness. It's like, oh, ha ha ha, the long-haul company is called Arsehall. Oh, you cads. Oh, look, Pier 69, ha fucking ha. Oh, look, Area 69, ha fucking ha. You used 69 twice? That's just lazy, Rockstar. That's lazy on so many levels. Its talk station, WCTR, honestly, I find it miserable. It is a hovel of tiresome, here's a segment where the joke is that this guy's a gay paedophile bullshit. The only segment I like is the customary Laszlo interview, and it is frankly the weakest Laszlo appearance of the whole trilogy. Laszlo, the ultra-lame V-Rock DJ, is the best one, so we're clear. Laszlo saying he's the master of darkness in the blandest tone possible is funnier than anything in San Andreas. I'm not sure if there's even a discernible quality gap between the two, honestly. Maybe I'm so comically biased towards Vice City that I forgive all its bad humour more easily than I forgive San Andreas's. Because, I mean, honestly, saying all this, all the shit I said about Vice City's badly aging humour absolutely applied to that game. And it applies here too. The edgy, controversial humour, with capital letters on all those words, is all either kinda lame or just boringly offensive. Like, OG Loke sure gets to enjoy a lot of gay jokes, and implied prison rape jokes. And I'm afraid that just doesn't really float in my bathwater. Maybe I don't need 2004 Rockstar shitting and pissing all over my life and career in cute boy loving every fucking game, eh? Out of my face with this shit. I'm here for a good time, Rockstar. You gotta make this personal every single game. What did I ever do to you for liking cute boys? Let me live my life. At least Ken Rosenberg gets a cameo. This game gets funnier again when he's around. He's such a fucking mess. I just relate to it, you know? And so allow me to make a very, very messy conclusion here. I hope I have at least somewhat articulated my issues with San Andreas, why I found Vice City an overall more enjoyable experience. I know this is something of a contrarian opinion, and I'd like to assure you that I'm not just spouting off whatever risible nonsense I can think of to get some angry gazes flicking my way. I'm too lazy to be that cunning. Like, I get why someone would call this one their favourite. I can see how the scope and the sheer range of stuff they added here would appeal to you. I found Vice City's a smaller, more varied campaign and tighter focus a lot more enjoyable, but I kinda get ya. I get ya. I actually even see exactly how I can enjoy this game more, and it's something I've never really talked about in all three of these videos. Just fucking around in it. I've always kept these reviews very, very objectives and activities based, always going on about every single minigame and side mission. But it does occur to me far too late that a lot of people racked up their hours in these games stealing a car, buying a gun, and just letting rip on the world at large. Getting into long, ridiculous police chases where you've got no hope of survival, but the fun is kinda just in seeing how long you can bluff your way out of bother until the inevitability of death sets in. So, once I hit 100% completion, I did just that. I got my guns, I leapt headfirst into my tank, and I just fucking went for it. It turns out it's fun to see how long you can last when half the country's law enforcement wants you to knock it off. I was having a lot of fun doing that. Then I remembered the turret controls on the Rhino are silly in this game, and I got sad again. Oh well, close enough. As wrong-headed an approach as I may have had, for me, personally, I found the game really deeply flawed. All the PS2 GTA games are at this point. But I ended up a lot colder on this game than I expected to be. This video was really just an incredibly long-winded way for me to try and rationalise why I felt this way. I'm sorry if that's kind of a letdown or whatever. I feel like I tricked people by being like, GTA 3, great, Vice City, great, San Andreas, oh. I respect the game's ambition, you know? It's clear Rockstar wanted to go way above and beyond the previous games, right? Like, they didn't just want to make another city, they wanted to make a whole state. I can appreciate how this game is almost ahead of its time in some ways. I just liked Vice City a lot better. That's the end of this trilogy of overlong videos, by the way. I won't be doing Liberty City or Vice City Stories or any of the modern HD GTAs, I'm afraid. I've no real interest in it. However, if you somehow managed to enjoy this awful waste of bandwidth, thank you. I'm glad. Please show it to other people you think will enjoy it, and then hope you don't waste 2 hours of their life on a video that they hated. Or, you know, you don't have to. It's the done thing to nag your audience to do all your advertising for you, but I don't know, I get all nervous. It feels like I'm selling used cars and people can see the keys are slipping out of my sweaty palms, you know? The next video is probably about Yakuza 6, which is a sandbox crime game that I actually really like, so look forward to that. Bye.